Hi, everyone. You're listening to In the Lead. My name is Jennifer Tsang, and you're listening to a podcast that is dedicated to bringing leadership principles and leadership ideas to everyday people. Because I believe that leadership is a way of being, not a title or a function, but rather a way of being and how we lead ourselves and how we show up intentionally every day. Welcome back to the In the Lead podcast. I'm really excited for episode number 10 today because I got the opportunity to interview Stephen Diaz. And I've known Stephen for quite a while now. He's another um, person I met in kind of the Twitter sphere over the last couple of years. And we're just always having great conversations on Twitter. And Stephen's always so positive and has such a great message to share with people. And I know he has a lot of great rich experience as a leader and as a salesperson in the retail space. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear that conversation today, where we talk about a topic that I think is really important. And it's the topic of understanding the difference between a manager and a leader. And I say that why that's an important topic because I often hear the two words interchanged a lot. Like once you become a people manager, then by default, you become a leader. And I know that there's a lot of people who have that perception. So I'm here to dispel that perception today and talk about some of the things that you can do. Let's say if you're an individual contributor or you are a manager or you're an entrepreneur or you're an educator, what are some things that you can do to start embodying leadership principles? Because as Stephen and I have this conversation today, you'll understand what the differences are between managing. Managing, through this conversation, we discovered that it's more about doing and leadership is more about being. So, how can you develop more intentions and practices that help you start to be and act more like a leader in whatever it is that you do, whether, you're a mother or a father of a family and you have to show up as leader in that situation because you're leading your family, you're leading your household, you're developing future leaders. Whether you're an entrepreneur and you're leading a business, or even if you're a solopreneur, leading kind of the practice or whatever your expertise is leadership is all about being, and it starts with how do we lead ourselves? Because if we want to lead others, we need to be able to lead ourselves really, really well. So I look forward to this conversation today. And just a little bit of background about Stephen Diaz. He has spent many years leading sales teams of various sizes all over the country, big and small, in person, remote. He has led teams from here to there to everywhere. He is also a creator and a leader, or as he says, just a little bit of everything. If you need a little extra motivation in your day, I would encourage you to connect with him on his social platforms. So, in the show notes today of this episode, I will put links up to all the different ways that you can connect with Stephen. And I really recommend that you do because he, like I said earlier, he's just always such a positive, inspirational person with so many great messages to share. And he's really creative too. I mean, he's really into music and his artwork. So it's really just a delight to get to interact with him and get to know Stephen. So I hope you enjoy the episode today. Now, before we get started with the podcast, I wanted to just do a brief introduction for anybody who might not know me or might be listening to the podcast for the first time. My name is Jennifer Tsang, and I am an ICF certified leadership coach. So I work with executives, managers, aspiring managers, and everyday people like entrepreneurs, people in the medical field. I work with people who want to develop that deeper level of consciousness into their leadership and specifically around mindfulness. So I work with a lot of folks who want to really discover that and really build new intentions, new practices towards having more of that mindfulness so that you can find more value and enjoyment in your everyday life. So if you want to check me out and get in contact, you can visit my website. It's www.coachwithinsight.com. It'll also be in the show notes if you want the direct link. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. I host a community chat every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific called Leaders Chat. And if that's something that you're interested, come on over and check us out. We're a fun bunch of people who like to have fun and just talk about leadership. So there's always a lot of great insights. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Stephen. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the In the Lead podcast. My name is Jennifer Tsang, and I am here today with Stephen Diaz. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm glad we could do this conversation. I always love Stephen and I met over Twitter. I think it was like last year, right? Sometime last year.
Yeah. Right before everything kind of got a little chaotic, you and I
Yeah.
kind of linked up on some different Twitter chats.
Yeah. And I've just always loved your perspective. And I know that we often will have very long conversations about leadership. So I'm really excited about our conversation today because we're going to be talking about what is the difference between being a manager and being a leader. So that's our topic for today. But Stephen, if you don't mind just telling the listeners, maybe in a couple of minutes, who are you and who is Stephen?
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for allowing me to join you on your fantastic podcast. I'm super thrilled and really love listening to all the things that you're putting out into the world. And I just very appreciative of you. So a little bit about me, I've spent about 2 decades in various different organizations, managing small teams of, 5 to 10 people all the way up to 500 plus, and really have been just kind of obsessed with leadership behaviors the whole time, just really looking at how to think a little differently as a leader, how to inspire, motivate, and help others, and really bring to life the teams that we're able to manage. So, I've just spent a lot of time thinking about leadership, doing a lot of leadership kind of stuff myself. I've got a big background in sales and retail, and kind of now in a transition where I'm really unlocking the other side of me, the other things that I'm passionate about, and dipping into a lot of the creative things that I'm interested in. And so I spend a lot of my time working on various types of artwork and playing a lot of different instruments and allowing myself to be free to do the things that I want to do and love to do. And I always try to send out a message of hope and inspiration to those that I interact with to hopefully unlock something on their creative side, because I feel like, at the end of the day, all of us spend so much time, either 8 hours a day or sometimes more, working, doing the things that, we have to do because we need to do it because it's for our livelihood, but maybe we're not dipping into the things that we want to do for ourselves. And so over my career, I've spent a lot of time in various sales organizations trying to inspire others to really bring their best to work. And now I'm kind of adventuring out to just inspire, whether it's through a tweet or through an image or just through an interaction, somebody out there, one or whoever's there, just try to inspire others to unlock their creative side, to think a little differently so they can enjoy each and every day and follow their passion.
That is awesome. Well, I can definitely co-sign that because I've, often been inspired and just in amazement, at the artwork that you posted. I just think it's so cool. And I can definitely see that creative side of you. And, I appreciate all of the inspiration. There have been many days where I was just like, I hate the world. I can't do this. And then I see one of your tweets and I'm like, okay, I think I can do it now. Like it's just always had this uplifting, inspirational, uh, kind of energy. So I always appreciate that from you.
Oh, well, thank
So
you.
it's really awesome. So when we're talking, so over your career, right, having worked in sales, like you mentioned, in small teams, large teams, what would you say is the difference between a manager and a leader?
Well, I think it's pretty easy to start that. If we all jumped on Glassdoor, we went on LinkedIn and looked for a job, you're not really finding titles out there that say leader. You really find that uh, the titles that you're looking at, the things that people are going for, the things they're striving for, is that management role, that management way of doing things. You've got to manage people. You're going to have to manage operations. You're going to have to manage. So management truly is the management side of it. How are you handling your business? How are you doing the day to day? How good are you at that? And then I
Mhm.
think really that leadership side starts to pop out when you're looking at how do you influence that business? How do you really motivate and influence the people? And it's a mindset. To me, leadership's a mindset. How are you leading people day to day to be excited to come to work? How are you helping them, really want to be in the moment, to do the things we have to? And there's going to be times that we love what we're doing as a team, and there's going to be times that we don't love what we're doing.
Mhm.
And you as a leader bring that mindset to manage that day to day, to help people and help the organization grow and help people grow and create great customer experiences. And so that's kind of how I look at it. I look at the management as almost to me like an operational thing, right? It's kind of like the
Mhm.
beginning, it's the function. And then the
Mhm.
leadership side of it to me really breaks down to your mindset, uh,
Mhm.
and bringing that mindset to others and inspiring others to do the best that they can.
So what I'm hearing in that, and let me know how this lands with you, but I hear it's doing versus being.
Correct. Yeah. And you know me, I'm all about do, do, do. And when I say
Yeah.
do, it's put the game plan together, right? You've got the management side of it. You understand the ins and outs of your business, and then going out there and leading and doing. Yeah. And then you go out there and do, and then you're able to become influential and motivational, and you're able to enjoy your day to day. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that from my perspective as well. I feel like it's a way of being, right? Or like a mindset. It's something that no matter your title, no matter, what industry you're in, no matter what you're doing, you can be a leader. And I personally happen to believe that leadership starts with self. So usually, how well can we manage ourselves is pretty indicative of how we lead and manage others. So developing that kind of internal kind of really knowing yourself well, to me, the great leaders all know themselves really, really, really well. Um, and that just is an extension of how they lead others.
Very, very true. And you don't have to have a fancy title to be a leader either. And that's the
Mm,
other part of it, because if it's a state of being, it's a state of, how your mindset is, how you're bringing yourself to the table in any interaction. I mean, anyone can
mhm.
be a leader, and I'm really a
Yeah.
big believer that anyone anywhere can lead. And you can, because when you're leading, it's leading somebody to something else, right, and you can
Mhm.
be helping somebody, just lead them to a better mindset for the day because they interact with you. And
Mhm.
that's leadership. I mean, you can lead somebody to, you're in line at the grocery store, and you've
Mhm.
got the clerk there who's had every single person come through, and it's just swipe, 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 put in your credit card,
Mhm.
thank you very much, here's your receipt.
Yeah.
And you can lead them and inspire them through your interaction and be a leader
Mhm.
for them of hope. You can lead them to hope, you can lead them to a
Mhm.
smile, you can lead them to something just a little different than what they were expecting, because you went through their checkout, you brought your energy, your mindset, your positivity to that
Mhm.
to that person, and now you're
Yeah.
leading them, and you have no idea the ripple effect that can come from that. That's the beauty of
Yeah.
leadership, is there's a ripple effect that happens. You might not see it, but you
Mhm.
can leave an impact on somebody and lead them to a change in their own mindset just by
Mhm.
you showing up, being present, and leading your life, right? Going off what you said,
Mhm.
yourself, leading yourself
Mhm.
in a way that's what you believe in and what's good for you. So yeah.
So I'm gonna say hashtag preach. I'm like over here like, yoo yeah. I mean, you basically took all the words out of my mouth, right? I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. And for me, it's almost like the managing is the doing, and it's like the results, right? It's the we can see these tangible results. Great managers know how to manage their business extremely well. Right. So you see it on a piece of paper. The leadership, though, it's a little bit more tricky, right? Because I don't think you necessarily see direct results, maybe something that you could put on a piece of paper. But like you said, the ripples are so profound that we may not ever realize, right? The impact that we're having on a single person or even a community. I mean, you have no idea. So it's almost like this thing that you can't really, feel or see or really have a tangible example of, but like it's just something you can feel. I don't know. It's always been this like you can just feel it um, when you're in the presence of great leadership.
Yeah, and anyone can learn to be a great manager. That's the truth of
Mhm.
it. It takes a lot of training. We can throw you in a lot of webinars. You'll figure out how to be a good leader, and you'll
Mhm.
light the fire underneath you if your results aren't there.
Mhm.
But those who are able to learn their roles and then start to lead people, the ripple effect is you're impacting people, and it's not that we're talking about it like, oh my gosh, you motivated me today, so therefore I'm
Right.
going to do better. It's, you
Right.
see it in people's eyes, you see it in their,
Mhm.
in the way they walk, in the way they talk, in the
Right.
way they bring themselves to work, in the way they present themselves, because they have a leader who believes, who can inspire them. And that's really the ripple effect. So you're right, it's not tangible. You're not putting it into an Excel file and tracking and trending it every day, right?
Right.
You
Right.
hear a lot about behavior coaching. So what's the behavior behind this? And what's behavior? And I think that's
Mhm.
really where, if the good leaders go out there and they're looking at behaviors, and they're
Mhm.
looking, it's kind of like they're standing at the edge of a, like a, there's a pond, and
Mhm.
leaders are looking at the different behaviors, and they just kind of throw a pebble in and watch the ripple effect and hope that,
Mhm.
that moment of inspiration ripples inside that
Mhm.
individual to allow them to kind of unlock themselves into
Yeah.
doing what it is they need to do. And
Yeah.
inspiring people is huge for me, and I think that's really where the success comes from, with great leaders, is they're really able to hit that hit that string inside somebody,
Mhm.
to unlock them to be able to say, not only am I doing this because it's my job, but I'm doing it because now I'm good at it. Now I believe in myself. Now this is something I
Mhm.
want to do. This is,
Mhm.
now I'm comfortable in where I'm at. So I think that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me, at least on the surface, it feels a lot easier to manage versus leading because there's so many different factors and things maybe that you can't control when you're leading in that way. But when you're managing, like, let's say, a business or even
Mhm.
resources within a business, you have very logical, let's say, options, and yeah, you can teach people, people can learn almost kind of like a machine, right? But
Yep.
it's all the soft skills, right? All of those intangibles that eh, you know, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of courses, there's a lot of work that you can do, but it takes almost work that you can't really see or again quantify. So therefore for me it just feels like it makes it so much more difficult than learning a business, learning to manage it really well. So that's where I see the differences too.
You're 100% right. It's just like a machine. I mean, anyone could take a checklist and
Mhm.
open up a
Mhm.
business, go through the business, go do it. But that doesn't guarantee that you're going to have great customer experience, which is going to create comebacks, people coming
Right.
back. That doesn't mean that your employees are going to be inspired to do a great job when they're none
Mhm.
of that. You can say, did I check in with my associate today? Yes. Did I do this? Did I do? And you can checklist
Yep.
your way to checking out. And that's kind of how I look at it. Is checklists are the best way to get you going, to get you understanding the role. But
Mhm.
eventually, if you're only dependent on that checklist, you're eventually going to be checked out.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
You're not going to be looking at the behaviors of your business. You're going to say, I did this. I did everything on my checklist,
Mhm.
but I'm not getting the results I wanted. But I should be, because I'm 100% done with my checklist. And that's kind of where I think of, like, to build your machine, you've got to have that flow. You've got to have the right way, right? Get your checklist, figure
Mhm.
it out, understand the ins and outs of your business, understand how it's going to run operationally.
Mhm.
But then you're going to have to put your presence into it. You're going to have to bring your energy, your mindset, your motivation to grow that business, because anyone can follow a checklist, but that
Mhm.
doesn't guarantee that it's going to be successful.
Yeah. People are not checklists, right? I mean, I think people can do checklists, going back to the doing, right? But you can't really
Yep.
be a checklist. So it's like,
No.
yeah, I feel like, yeah, and I mean, anyway, we can get into a lot of psychology talk around that, um, one thing that's popping into my mind as we were talking was it's fascinated me for quite some time actually, where a lot of managers will kind of put a title on themselves and say, I am a leader. Like just because I am a manager, therefore that now equals I am a leader. Somehow we've gotten to this place where we interchange leadership or leader and manager a lot, or almost like leaderships only want to become like a people manager. Where do you think that mentality comes from where we now assume that because I manage people, I'm a leader?
Well, I think it's, going from that individual contributor to that management to management or leader, however you want to look at it. First off, they've worked so hard probably to get there. And I think there's a lot that comes with that. There's a lot of pride, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of, I'm doing well at this, or I was a great individual contributor, therefore I should
Mhm.
be a good leader. And then I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of ways where tenure comes into play with that too, where you have a lot of managers who've been there, and
Mhm.
well, it's kind of the my way or the highway type mentality, or I think it's just there's a lot of misunderstanding because I don't think we're always having the right conversation. We're not using the finesse.
Mhm.
Managing people takes a lot of finesse,
Mhm.
and I can be your manager, your leader. I can tell you I'm a million different things. I could also tell you that I'm a wizard as well, but doesn't
Mhm.
mean the people are going to respect that and believe that until there's the proof behind everything. And I think that's the big part is, although you might have the title, although you might feel like you're a leader, say you're a leader, do some good leadership things until your team believes and you're
Yeah.
connecting with them in the right way. It doesn't really matter what you got going on
Mhm.
until you can inspire those people internally. And
Yeah.
and your title doesn't inspire them. It might
Mm.
give you respect.
Mhm.
Uh, Coming out there saying I read a lot of books, I've led a lot of teams. Your resume doesn't necessarily inspire the people who work for you,
Right.
but the way you pick up the phone, the way you understand them as a human, the way you're
Mhm.
able to say I hear you and listen and then help them grow, that
Mhm.
without being said becomes the way you lead them.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost feels like a title you don't give yourself, others give to you. It's not something that I just say, "Oh, okay, today I've decided that Jennifer Tsang is a leader." Right? Like I can't give myself that title, right? I mean, I guess I could, and I could just walk around, doing that. But I feel like it's something that is given to you. You don't give it to yourself.
Agreed, agreed. It's there's a lot of different ways that it comes about, and I think most of it comes down to it's how people approach you, and
Mm,
you kind of start to feel it. You get asked for advice that's outside of the norm. You get asked
mhm,
for how to do things a little differently. You become a go-to expert in certain things, and it's not about how do I do this function. It's how do I get better, and it's all those complicated psychological things where people just coming to you just to be heard because they feel like it's safe. But people come to you for advice a lot when you're a leader because you're going to be able to point them and they trust you. And I think also that leadership component comes with trust. And
oh, yeah.
so just because you're a manager doesn't mean people are
Mhm.
going to trust you. And just
Nope.
because you say I can lead you and give you the right answer doesn't mean people are going to trust you. You got to
Yeah.
put the proof in it. And that's where we see thought leaders, the ones who grow and do well, right? They write
Mhm.
most of the leaders out there, they write a book first. Here's all my words of everything I believe. Then they go out there and talk about it, right? So there's the proof of the
Mhm.
pudding, and then there's results from it because people have actually implemented what happens. And that's the same
Mhm.
way it's going to work for somebody who's a leader in an organization. You can have a team of five, a team of 500, team of 10,000, but you start building your book in your way with your emails, right? Your conference calls. You start
Mhm.
building it with the way you interact. And that's the basis. And this is what I believe. This is how we're going to do it. Then you build that trust factor into it. And then the team's, okay, you know what? Well, this is what the email said. This is how this worked. I can believe. I
Mhm.
have faith.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how you build your credibility. And then before you know it, you're not having that ridiculous turnover. You have people who seem excited to come to work and are doing better, and you haven't really changed a lot of your operations, but suddenly your performance is lifted because there's trust, there's understanding within the team.
Yeah. I find that a lot, when especially around performance or engagement or any of these other metrics that we track. I find that corporations, instead of turning to leadership, they turn to management. And it's about, okay, let's say our engagement numbers were only 40% this quarter. How do we get it back up over 80? Like, what are some of the things, like we start going into very tactical, logical conversations about how do we increase, first of all, I think they're kind of very, what's the word? They're not real tangible numbers. First of all, I don't know how we can really track how someone's feeling at any given moment, but how do we turn to management a lot but we want to disguise it as leadership. We want to say, yes, if we have these numbers, therefore that means we are doing a good job. We are leading our teams. If we don't meet those numbers from, again, employee performance, engagement, all those
Mhm.
things, like we want to use management to try to figure out how we're almost too. So what I'm saying is I feel like we're almost maybe too fixated on like these ways of tracking these things because we want a tangible like number we can see on a spreadsheet, but we don't use leadership to actually work on that number. We want to use management. We want to figure out, we want to do right to get that needle to move. Um,
Y- Yeah, and it gets complicated, right? Especially when you have big
mhm,
organizations and you've got so
mhm,
many different components. And when you're looking at, the 30,000 view looking down, all you're seeing is the spreadsheet. You're not seeing those
mhm,
day-to-day interactions. You're not seeing all of the stuff that needs to go on behind the scenes. And so in a perfect world, you could give leadership training that people would be able to understand, implement quickly. But leadership comes down to, it's no different than learning an instrument. You have to
mhm,
practice at it. You have to try to say, I'm an empathetic leader, go out there and do things that aren't empathetic, and then
mhm,
see that result and change it. No different than it's kind of like in the sales world, right?
mhm,
If everybody followed the exact sales script and everything like that, then we'd be selling great. Well, everybody's saying it on the paper, they have their script,
mhm,
but then you got to take the script and start to change it to your personality and to the things and use your experiences and draw all that into it. And I think that's where we all run too fast. Businesses run too fast. We all want to grow, 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 go, go, go. And so
mhm,
the easy way to do that is this number is wrong. These things will fix it. And let's go get
mhm,
it done. And um, it'd be great if in a world where we could have everybody take a lesson, learn how to be a leader, go out and do that. But it really takes internalizing it for yourself, going through, like you said earlier, you've got to work on yourself to become that great
mhm,
leader. And your organization can't go out there and fix that component. They can teach you how to be a leader. They can give you all the behaviors. They can give you all the things, all the tools you're going to need, but it still comes
mhm.
from within. And you have
Oh
to
yeah.
say to yourself that this is the type of leader I want to be. Plus, the other thing about leadership is everybody builds the leader that they are
Mhm.
around the leaders they've had, the good ones and bad. Everyone can tell you the worst manager they ever had. Everyone can tell you the best leader they ever had. And
Oh
I
yeah.
guarantee you, if you took
Mm,
that leader, and you look at how that person manages and leads, if you were able to go back in time and look at all the managers that a great leader had, you'd be able to pinpoint and say, these are the things they do because of this person. Here's the things they do
mhm,
because of this person. This is why they
mhm.
don't act this way.
Yep.
And if you could go and I think that's the unique part about it is we all are able to bring these great components from all these different people we've worked with, who we've worked for,
Mm,
even teachers, mentors. I mean, your
yeah.
coaches growing up, if you played sports, there's so many different ways that you're learning leadership competencies, which
Mhm,
is why when you're in high school and want to go to apply to a college and you're writing your college essay, they're looking at, well, what leadership competencies have you done?
yeah.
That's great that you were on this team, but tell me how you led this team, right?
Mhm.
And so we're
Yep,
learning it without knowing it. And so
yep,
I'd say it starts earlier, like focused on the younglings. That's where
yep,
we focus. And if we want good leaders in the future in business, and we've got to focus on the leadership competencies way early on and
yeah.
have that be something that's more than just an extracurricular activity because you decided to do it. And now you've got only a handful of people in that one school doing it. Half of
Mhm.
them aren't ever going to pursue it. And you've got a small bucket that keeps growing all the way up. So I think it's just a
Right.
whole bunch of that.
Yeah. No, I think that's true too. I mean, I also think there's systematic and fundamental mindset changes that need to occur as well. Because as you were talking, I was thinking, especially about young people and especially about coming into a career and trying to really grow and become either manager or executive in an organization. It's how we view and how we tie worth to the things that you do. So, for instance, in business, at least from my experience, most executives, if they're looking at people on who should we promote or who should we give more responsibility to because we trust them because they work well with others, it's usually the people who are loud The people who
Yeah.
also are very visible, right, in air quotes. I just love when we talk about visibility in organizations
Yeah.
because that just basically means you're out there kind of pumping your stuff and you're
Right.
but it's all so ego driven. It's all so results, tangible, like, and I always say perceive results because I love that in business because it's never the same and it can be one thing one day and something else the next. But these perceived business results that make you look good, maybe to your bosses. And then, but so we're rewarding people on that. We're basically saying these are the rules of the game. You want to become more powerful in this company or this organization. These are the things that you need to do, which is going completely against like what leadership really is. We're not telling people go be nice to people, go show empathy to your coworkers, go, treat people respectfully. It's more of, no, what results can you provide us? So that's where I see like the big gaps. Like when people in management, it's like you got to management because you were playing the game and doing all the results, but you totally just stepped all over so many people and burned so many bridges. Like, there's no, how could you be a leader? Like, I don't even know how that's possible. Like, you built such a bad reputation. So I see a lot of that too. I feel like systematically, like we just are so focused on results that are just so tangible that if we're not looking at the other side, there's no wonder we have no leaders then. I mean, we're not really setting the rules up for people who are great leaders to really be successful.
Yeah, and it's typically it's that taking the best individual contributor, somebody who previously was doing in that one bottom down role, the one
Mhm,
right below, and then we
mhm,
throw them into this big, big role now, and now it's overwhelming, and now their fear kicks in. So no
mhm.
longer are they able to hold on to the things that were making them great before, and now they've got fear because, well, first off, they're
Yeah.
probably getting a bigger paycheck, so they want to hold on to that. They've got
Mhm,
the responsibility of all these people, and so fear instantly kicks in because I'd say a lot of times we don't prep a lot of people in a lot of different places, in different ways I've worked, is we don't prep them for that next stage early enough.
yeah.
I think that plays into it. I think
Mhm,
also there's a lot of, you hear a lot, especially in a sales world of, this is, and especially coming from a retail background of, this is your box. This is, pretend that this is you're the CEO of your own company, right? I can't tell you how many
mm,
times I've heard that. Pretend you're the
mhm,
CEO of your own company. Pretend this is all yours
mhm.
until the results don't match. And then it's not pretend it's all yours. And all of
Right.
that starts to fade away. And I think that plays into what you're saying. It's,
Mhm,
we kind of have to remember that ultimately, when we're working for somebody else, at the end of the day, it's the duty of the manager to ensure that the results are met. And I think that
mhm,
a lot of people, because they don't hit the results, they want to say, I'm a quote unquote leader. I'm influencing
mhm,
these people. I make them feel good. Sorry that my
mhm.
results aren't here. So I think it's a balance, right? You have to be able
Yeah.
to say, I'm making my results here. Basically, how I kind of always looked at it was, this is whatever it took for me to be 100% of my KPIs.
Mm,
That's the manager in me. I need to make
mhm,
sure I manage my business to 100% KPIs in all these buckets. Once
mhm,
that's achieved, then I'm free to go lead and push that lever and move it higher than the 100%. But if I'm not at 100%, if I'm rolling at an 80% in something, if I'm not hitting
mhm,
in my mind that 100%, the KPIs, and in my mind that I was failing if I wasn't at 100% of those KPIs. So I would look at it
mm,
that way of, that's my job as a manager. My job is to manage the business to 100% KPI in these buckets. Once that happens, then I'm free to kind of use the leadership competencies that I have, the influential, motivational side of me, that creative side of me, to now move that lever from 100% to 150%, and then
mm,
be able to go and have stretch projects and get people really set up for the next level and do all those extra things that come with the leadership side. But
mhm,
if you're not managing, then you're definitely not leading, is kind of
mm,
also how I look at it. And so I think there's a lot of that plays into it, is
mm.
you have to realize it's a balance between the two.
Yep. Yeah. That was what I was hearing in your story was it feels like it's both. And it feels like even as you're trying to hit that 100% mark, and just from what I know of you, that you would be leading that whole way. You would be using empathy. You would be building trust. You would be doing all of the great things that leaders do to motivate their team, to inspire them, right? Like that's just a part of what you do, but you also there are parts that, you have to manage, right? Because you do need the results. But I just feel like also in corporate a lot, it's we put the managing first and we think about the leadership second. I think it needs to be reversed, meaning I think the results, I deeply believe that results will be there no matter how strong we manage something. Um, the people are the ones who are going to drive the results. So if we're not taking care of people, if we're not really putting them at the center of how we're managing our business, then we're never going to be successful in terms of all of these things we like to measure, right? Like how satisfied employees are they engaged? Are what are retention levels looking like all those numbers we're trying to always look at. We're not
Yeah,
if we're not putting people at the center of that, then what does it mean to hit 100% of your KPIs, right? What's the meaning behind
100%.
that?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, so I feel like there's again systematically I mean in my lifetime I would hope we see this mentality or this mindset shift away from kind of the metrics and the results first and more of like the leadership and the people aspect first. And that's the big lever that's driving everything. And I know, I mean, just from all of our conversations, Stephen, I know that's exactly the type of manager you would be. You wouldn't be, you would never not be a leader.
well, I guess when I say that, it's you activate that goes back to the self part of it, right? So if
Hmm.
if 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 I'm not delivering the results that the company hired me to do, that I signed on the
Hmm.
dotted line, then that's where I got to activate my own inner leader and look at those gaps,
Yeah.
and that's where it's on me. And so I think
Mhm.
that's where it becomes, it's a balancing game. Leadership is just a straight up balancing game. You have to
Mhm.
really be in tune to your people,
Yeah.
because you can say, you know what, I put my people first, I do all
Mhm.
the things, I understand them, and still not get results because now it's not inspiring their inner leader within themselves. Now it's more of a hand holding.
Yeah.
It's a
Right.
blanket. Just a
Mhm.
safety net so they don't get in trouble where you're taking all the blame. So it's a whole bunch of different components that all come together, but it really comes down to what you said at first, is activating that leader within yourself. And I think
Mhm.
once you can activate that super strong, then you're able to activate in other people. If you're a leader not
Mhm.
activating that leadership competency in somebody else, and you're not really leading, you're still really
Mhm.
heavy on that management side. You're just not
Yeah.
a dictator.
Right.
You're an understanding person, you're leading, but you're not inspiring. And I think it goes, leaders are the ones who can inspire, they motivate
Yeah.
people, they inspire within themselves, right? They become kind of that
Mhm.
safe haven. Like, I like to go to work because I have a cool leader, knowing that whatever happens today, whether I fail, whether I have a roadblock, whether something comes, if something comes up today, I know I have my leader who's going to break it down to me, help me understand it. I'm not going to be fearful of that conversation. And if I
Mhm.
am, that's probably because I did something I know I should have, you have that trust and respect. And that's where it kind of all plays back there. So
Yeah.
I think it's a, it's a balancing act. It
Mhm.
can't be just taught in a webinar.
Mhm.
You have to go out there and think you're inspiring people, see it not happen, start to adjust
Mhm.
it. And then the other part is you just got to ask a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah. Curiosity is big. Yeah. I agree
Yeah.
with that. Mhm. And
You
that
know,
even gets back to ourselves, right? Like, I can't
mhm,
remember who I was talking to recently about just how to kind of manage and lead and even coach ourselves.
mhm,
Is a lot of that's just through curiosity, right? Just getting really curious with yourself and kind of like you were saying, right? I'm not hitting the numbers, maybe taking that time to stop, reflect, ask yourself some questions, but even just doing that process, I think helps you again not only connect to yourself more deeply, right? And that's like a form of leading yourself, right? Having that restraint, you're not just reacting and you're able to act in a place that's much more inspiring. And I feel like you're right, like we're constantly activating people, like whether we realize it or not.
mhm.
Um, how can we do that more in an inspirational way? And for me, it just comes back to self always.
Agreed. Agreed. And
Yeah.
I like how it plays off too, like we were talking. It's that accountability factor, and it's really
Mhm.
looking at this is my team. Here's my performance.
Mhm.
Whether if it's good, here's my part and why it's good. If it's not so good, here's the part I play and why it's not so good. And if leaders ask themselves that question all the time,
Mhm.
that's where you can get curious about what you can do different. So if your team is phenomenal and you ask yourself, what's my part in it? And you haven't been interacting with your team and all of this stuff, then it really isn't you.
Mhm.
Right? If you're
Yep.
avoiding the phone calls, if you're doing the stuff that's not, inspiring them, and then they're really out there leading their own, maybe you set them all up for success. But could you imagine how great that team and you would be doing if you got a little more involved?
Yeah. Right.
And then the same flip side goes to a struggling team.
Mhm.
My
Mhm.
team's struggling. Well, anyone can point fingers at the bottom performer, and
Mhm.
everybody can say you're only as strong as your lowest performer, or whatever that saying is. But your team's only as good as your lowest performer, your bottom performer, whatever that saying is.
Mm.
If you really look at it, it's okay. Well, my team's not performing.
Mm.
What's my part in it? What have I really been doing? Here's my
Mhm.
bottom performer. What
Yeah.
was my last one-on-one like?
Yeah.
What did we
Yeah.
talk about? What was my follow up? Go ask yourself a million different questions about how
Mhm.
you're interacting with your team, and then say, okay, here's the good things I'm doing, here's the not so good things, and here's what I need to just do for myself to be able to
Mhm.
inspire my team differently. Because obviously, my part in this is A, B, C, and D.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the accountability piece, like we were talking about.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's so true, right? I mean, I think that's just truth in general, right? I think a lot of people find it hard to have that self accountability because it's always someone else's fault, right? Or there's always someone else to blame. There's, a million reasons why we don't want to kind of look in the mirror and kind of look at ourselves first and say, hey, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
what happened? Like, really kind of doing that deeper level of processing. And then, once you resolve, like you said, you start identifying, right? Like, what went well, almost doing kind of like a post-mortem after, these things happen and just kind of take yourself through that. And then I find it's just easier to have those then potentially difficult conversations with people once you've kind of already process through a lot of that because then ego's not getting in the way and you're not having that same reaction where it's like, oh, I just want to, figure out what happened or blame them for something. You're able to be a little bit more grounded and be able to
Mhm.
come to that conversation with more curiosity. I've just noticed that for myself that tends to help.
Well, yeah, if you're asking yourself, okay, here's what was my part in it? What have I done, good or bad
Hmm.
or indifferent? And then you're going to a conversation saying, hey, okay, so you know what? I was thinking about it.
Hmm.
I was thinking about the last time we talked, and you can reflect back. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of it comes to reflection. I think
Yes.
it's very easy to go into a conversation and say, well, I told you, and we
Hmm.
discuss, but it's not reflecting.
No.
It's just a checklist of a conversation.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
we really reflect, okay, well, how do you remember our conversation? Here's what I was
Mhm.
thinking about. What about this? Where were we at?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that brings in those soft skills. But if the leader's not asking the questions before going into the one-on-one, then it's not going to do anyone any good. The leader really has to say, take that prep time. Like,
Hmm.
I think it's huge for leaders to prep before they go into a one-on-one with someone. Like,
Yeah.
really
Hmm.
bring up your notes, do the research, I mean, people spend hours of research to buy a TV, and leaders spend 3 minutes checking an Excel file before they go talk to the person
Right.
who's running half their business.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And then hop
And
on and say, what do you want to talk about today? Or whatever. You know how that goes when we're not
oh,
prepared.
yes, I'm smiling and just laughing 'cause
I like to
I
have
do
open
know.
conversations with people because I don't like to come across as somebody who's control. No, what it is we're not prepped.
Yeah. That
That's
is
for
true. I
sure.
mean, I think that's a fundamental thing and that's a great point because a lot of what you're doing ahead of time is that processing. But I feel like when if we're going in cold into a conversation, we're using that conversation as our processing time. If you've already
Hmm.
reflected and kind of done that kind of internal kind of like understanding of what's happening and what you want to do, it makes it a lot easier. And I love that you said, because I often use this as well, is just say, hey, I was thinking about something. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. And what
Hmm.
that also does is it leaves that person feeling empowered
Yeah.
because I believe, like, especially as a leader, we need to do more of this where it's not about you giving them the answers. People, I believe, honestly, don't want you to tell them what to do, and they don't want you to give them the answers. Like, they want to discover it themselves. So how can we maybe frame up a conversation in a way that, guides them in a certain direction, but they come up with either, the lessons learned, or, hey, I was also reflecting about ABC, right? But helping
Hmm.
them also kind of identify it, see it, and own it is so powerful. I mean, to me, that's a big difference too between a manager and leader. I can easily tell someone, go do that, right? Or, you obviously didn't do this really well. You need to do this now, right? But if you can help just hold the space for somebody and just ask very open-ended questions and maybe set it up in a way like, hey, I was thinking about something. Let me know what your thoughts are on this or what comes up for you.
Hmm.
They feel much more like, oh, hey, I'm a part of this, right? I'm not just a
Right.
cog in the machine or I'm just a robot. Like, no, Steven actually cares about what I think. And they might, again, come up with that realization themselves without us even having to say a word. Like, that to me is like the really powerful conversations. And again, when people kind of have these ideas themselves, they tend to be more empowered and then will take action. And
Hmm.
it'll make your life so much easier. But again, I think that gets back to kind of self management, making sure you're taming your ego, making sure you're really processing and using that curiosity. And
There
I
it
feel
is.
like,
I was hoping you'd say that.
yeah, yeah.
Curiosity.
But of course, yeah. I mean, it's so much of it, but how much are we leading more with assumptions or
Hmm.
directives and not with curiosity? I mean, I see it every day and I'm like, wow, we'd be so much more productive, I think, if we could just be a little more curious. Um, but
Yeah.
it's hard for some people, I think. And if you're not managing your ego or managing yourself well, then it makes it almost impossible to be in that space.
Well, and it comes down to what kind of leader do you want to be? And some
Mm,
really just want the paycheck and the title. They want whatever that is. They want, there's so many components that go to that. But if I really like what you said about the curiosity, because if you can keep your people curious about their own development,
yeah. Hmm.
keep them thinking like, okay, so I did do this and it did work. What should
Hmm.
and I think that's where that open door policy comes into play. Like, come with me because come through my door, ping me all you want because you're so curious about getting better, not because you have a problem, this or the other, you can't figure something, like I
Hmm.
think we put it for I'll answer any question you got. You can
Hmm.
always ask me a question. I'm here for you. But if we spark their curiosity where not only are they looking at how to get better at the operation side or whatever that may be, but they're saying, okay, now I'm thinking, I'm reflecting. It's 3 days later, boss, and I'm
Hmm.
thinking about our one-on-one, and you left me with some stuff that I was supposed to work on, and now this had me thinking about this. And if we keep them curious about their own development, bring them in where we're partners together in their development, keep them
Hmm.
wanting that, it keeps them wanting to do better, keeps them wanting to come to the one-on-one. And I think it's easy to fall into, if it's hard for people to reflect that way. And I think it takes a lot of questions, it takes a lot of prep. So definitely leaders or managers who don't have time management down, that's the other side of it, is most often teams fall apart because the leader who's supposed to be out there inspiring, leading, and doing all of that doesn't even have their own time management down, which is going to make it
Hmm.
100% hard to have the time to stay curious.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like about what you said was it feels like it's taking people from putting them in the process and inviting them into the process. I don't know why, as you were talking, I was just hearing like invitation, like you're almost inviting them to come into this process, not just putting them or placing them in it and saying, this is what you need to do. Or in our one on ones, the first thing you say is like, hey, so what do you got for me? Um, I don't know that that's never been my style, but I've had managers in the past that were very much like that. And it just feels like, okay, this is just a part of the process. Like I'm just a part of it. I'm not invited into it.
Right. And it's not, it's a story. It's, to me, it's a story. Like the every one-on-one's a new chapter in a book that you're writing with that person. So if you've got
Mhm.
12 direct reports, then you've got 12 books you're writing,
Yeah.
and you need your notes, and you need to be able to say, well, last chapter, kind of like when you're watching the TV show on last week's episode. So last time we talked about this. What are your thoughts on that? How did
Mhm.
it go? Like, ask them what happened before we jump
Mhm.
into this is what I need you to do today. And those
Right.
little things like the recap, the reflecting,
Mhm. Mhm.
not only does it help them remember what you talked about if they didn't take their own notes, but also it shows them, hey, I'm paying attention to you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I care about you. You're
Mhm.
important enough to me that I remember everything we talked about.
Mhm.
I remember that you had this event going on, so I'm making sure to bring that up. So
Mm.
I understand you as a human. I know what you have going on in your life. And that's the
Yeah.
other part is I don't think there's a balance, but we
Mhm.
have to understand our people as a human being
Yeah.
before we can inspire them. And because
Mhm.
we've got to know to a surface level degree their triggers, what's going on in their world, when might things go where we're the wrong way in their own personal life and stuff, and just kind of have a general understanding. I don't think you need to be anyone's um therapist,
Mhm.
but you want to be somebody who generally understands them to a degree. I'm not here
Mm.
to be your best friend. I'm not here to
Mhm.
be your therapist, but I do generally understand you because I care about you that much because you're my direct report. And I think
Yeah.
those kind of play into that too, where that reflection piece in a one. I mean, one-on-ones to me are the biggest miss because they're the most underutilized. I mean, we just don't
Mhm.
use them the right way in a lot of different organizations that I've seen, and that's speaking for everybody out there. But overall, I think one-on-ones, if you just took your one-on-one time, did a little more prep,
Mhm.
really did the general understanding of where they are in their personal life, and did the in last week's episode, here's truly what we talked about. Where are you with this? What are your struggles? What's going right? What's not going right? And have that
Mhm.
open door where they can say, no, I really didn't do this because I forgot, not because
Yeah.
it's metric driven, but because it was a behavior that we talked about, and
Yeah.
have that safety where they can come to you and stay curious about getting better and then have you to guide them. So
Yeah. Yeah.
one-on-ones to me are crucial. And that's really where you get the opportunity to mentor, to guide, because people now want their leader to be a mentor. They want them
Mhm.
to guide them. They want them
Yeah.
to be tough enough, but also want them to be a teacher, right? They want them to
Yeah.
say, no, you aren't doing this right. So they don't fail at their job and eventually get fired. But they also want you to be
Mhm.
able to teach them. So you got to be a mentor. You got to be a
Yeah.
teacher. You got to be a coach.
Mhm. Yep. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say coach is a big one too that I'm a big advocate for. I agree. I mean, I think it takes a lot of different hats, and I mean, that's a whole other conversation, right? Like how we promote people into management has always bewildered me. You know,
That's everywhere.
yeah, that's everywhere. So we're getting towards the end of the conversation, but I wanted to ask you, what is one piece of advice you could give someone who wants to embody more leadership, or maybe they're a manager and they want to start finding more of that balance? What's one thing you could tell them that maybe they could do, or one thing they could start reflecting on or getting curious about with themselves to be more of that leader?
It really comes down to starting to ask yourself a lot of questions.
Mm,
That's the number one thing you can do. Like if you just go sit in a room and say, what is it I want to do?
mm,
What do I need to do? What would I love to do? What drives me crazy? What are my goals? What are my dreams? What am I good at? Start asking yourself a lot of questions. Be curious about yourself.
mhm.
What
Yeah.
are my triggers? What drives me nuts? What keeps me up at night? What keeps my boss up at night? I wonder, right? Huh? How do I play a part in that? What's my part in that?
Mm,
And I would say that for me, the number one thing that helped me throughout the majority of my career has been I journal those questions. And when I'm
mm,
in a state of frustration, then I say the number one thing I would do is start asking yourself a lot of questions. How I would do that is just get a journal and start.
mm,
Was I happy today? No. Why? Why? Just break it down. Keep breaking it down until you can get to your own root cause. Give yourself a one-on-one. If you're not getting a one-on-one from your boss, don't wait for a one-on-one from your boss. Start asking yourself a whole bunch of questions because you're going to be a little more honest with yourself. And it's easier to be honest with yourself if you're taking it and just going old school and writing it down by hand.
mhm. Oh, I love that.
What am I struggling with? What ways
Mhm,
could I get better with this?
mhm. Yeah,
Should
I
I
love
read
that.
books more? Stuff like that. And that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, I feel like I'm hearing a theme or a thread in this conversation as it sounds like it's a lot about just being curious with yourself and managing yourself better. And I love how you said, and I've always had this mentality. I can remember so much in my career where I've always said, if I have a leader who or a manager, executive, whatever, that isn't, present and isn't being the
Mhm.
leader that I need, well, I'm going to figure out how to lead myself. Like I'm going to figure out like I don't feel like I need them per se. But I feel like it comes back to that where it's about how do you really manage yourself and know yourself and get curious and know that super well because we can't always depend on other people, right? And a lot of things are out of our control. But if we can
Mhm.
do that, I think even if we don't feel like we're as successful, at least we'll feel a lot better. And I think it'll naturally build those leadership skills. And that's that practice you were talking about, right? I mean, I love that example you gave. You need to practice because yeah, use these opportunities, right? Like I'm feeling really pissed off today and I haven't met with my boss in a couple of weeks and like I just really feel like I need this one-on-one. How can you show up for a one-on-one with yourself? Right? And how can you maybe resolve some of those issues of that frustration you're feeling yourself and use that curiosity, like you said, to get to that root cause. I think that's the important part. I don't think most of us do enough of that, like getting to that root.
Yeah, I love how you brought up practice again because anyone who's listening to this has had to learn something and got really good at it through practice. But I
Mhm.
can tell you the majority of people listening couldn't tell us this is how I practice being a good leader, like truly
Mm-mm.
practiced and failed and took a swing at it. And
Mhm.
that's, you've got to do a lot of stuff. Like if you're learning an instrument, you go to your teacher after a week and say,
Mhm.
hello, this is what I practiced. They're going to know pretty quickly if you were
Yeah.
practicing for the last week or
Right.
not. Right.
Right.
If you have a baseball coach, basketball, golf,
Yeah.
whatever it is that you were learning and you went to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but we read books.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader, I've had a bookshelf of leadership books.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I got intentional and said, okay, this is what I read, this is what I love, and then when I actually tried to do it, like intentionally tried to do it, and I think that's the practice is this is what I learned. Here's how I'm going to intentionally mirror that,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually make it my own. And you can start practicing as a leader by saying, here's my favorite leader on the planet. Here's how I'm going to practice trying to be exactly mirror everything about that leader with my team until I'm comfortable enough or see that it's working. And then eventually you'll come into your own form. But I don't
Yeah.
think we think about the practice that goes into being empathetic or the practice that goes into listening better. We just say,
Yeah.
I'm a good listener
Yeah.
because I remembered one thing. I'm a good listener now. No, that doesn't. You got to practice these things, and to become a good leader, you have to practice.
Yeah. And who better to practice with than yourself, right? I mean, even the listening, even the empathy, you
Hmm.
can really cultivate a lot of that just with yourself, right? Am I listening to kind of what's coming up internally for me? Am
Hmm.
I showing empathy towards myself? Like, can I really feel, or am I numbing things, right? Or do I have a wall up that I can't really connect to or feel whatever is going on for
Right.
us? For me, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's the work, right? Is like you don't necessarily need other people or this perfect situation. It's like we have stuff coming up every day. Like just
Hmm.
start tuning in a little bit more and getting curious and who better to practice with, right? Because you know yourself really well. And one other thing I just wanted to touch on real quick because I heard you talking about it, and it was so important was it sounds like there's a lot of vulnerability in leadership. And I suspect that that's probably a major reason why so many people struggle with leadership because like you said, sometimes you fail, sometimes you don't, you know, do whatever it is you
Yeah.
wanted to do right, well, or whatever your expectation is.
I,
Um,
yeah. I got you all pumped up, and
mhm,
we all failed together, right? But that's
right.
where that accountability says, "This is my part in it." So when I made this
Yeah.
plan, you just got to be able to hold yourself accountable, and I think it's huge. When you're saying that, looking internally, right? You get curious,
Mhm.
you come up with these things, asking yourself a lot of questions and getting to the root cause, but then you got to commit to yourself and hold yourself accountable to do something about it and then make
Yeah.
sure that you follow through. So if you say I'm going to be a good listener, here's the three things I'm going to do to listen better,
Mhm.
And then you go into 3 conversations, like, you've got to be able, if you want to be a good leader, then you have to say, you know what? I said I was going to remember everyone's name on the first time. I haven't been doing that. I said I was going to,
Mhm.
those kind of things. Or I was going to use
Yeah.
their name a lot more. And then if you
Mhm.
just let it go by the wayside, you're not doing
Yeah.
the things. So you've got to hold yourself accountable. You got to be curious.
Yeah.
You've got to
Mhm.
do those things. And ultimately, the vulnerability comes from, you're going to put yourself out there.
Mhm.
You're going to put this is what I believe. This is what we could do. You're going to inspire. You're going to pump them up, and it's going to
Mhm.
go great. Or it might not go so well. And you have to be strong enough and reflect on your own to say, okay, this is how I'm going to go to my team to explain. This
Yeah.
was my part in it. This is where I let
Yeah.
us down. This is
Mhm.
obviously where all of you let us down as a team, as a unit.
Mhm.
But here's where we have to go now.
Mhm.
And then I think also that pulse check with yourself, pulse check with your team. I find too often that people make a plan at the beginning of the month, wait till the end of the month. Oh my goodness, everything went sour, right?
Yeah.
So those one-on-ones, have a pulse check with yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, anyone out there who wants to be a better leader can go buy a journal right now and just start journaling questions about
Mhm.
themselves, commitments to themselves, hold themselves accountable, take real notes in meetings, take
Mhm.
real notes on one-on-ones,
Mhm.
and then create real plans for yourself. Anyone who goes out there and says, here's what I heard, here's the plan for myself, here's what I heard, here's the plan for myself, this is what happened,
Mhm.
will just grow overnight compared to
Yeah.
any of their peers because they're observing, learning,
Mhm.
putting a plan together and doing some work. And that's it. And that's really the difference. Is it takes a little work to get a little
Mhm.
better than you were
Mhm.
yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so true, and knowing that just like with anything, right, you pick up a new instrument, you're
Hmm.
probably gonna fail a lot in the beginning, right? Or it's gonna feel awkward. It may not
Yeah.
feel natural, right? But, like anyone who has played an instrument, played a sport, like, you eventually start to build your confidence, you eventually it
Hmm.
starts to become more natural, but it's I mean, repetitions, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
gotta do it a lot. So I know that for some, it might feel really uncomfortable, especially in the beginning as they're trying to reframe and reset some of their mindset. But, it takes time and just to kind of really work with it and stick with
Yeah.
it because it's just like anything else. Was something that was coming up for me too.
Yeah. You can, I mean, it's you do have to get uncomfortable to learn how to
Yeah.
get comfortable, and then you're going to want to
Yeah.
get uncomfortable again, because
Yeah.
otherwise, basically, anything you do, you're going to climb up a little bit, you're going to plateau, and when you hit that plateau, you got to climb up again, and then you'll hit a plateau and then climb up again. And
Yeah.
that's growth. That's growth. It's never just skyrocket to the top. It's, you're going to fall and stuff like that, but if
Yeah.
you really look at it like and it doesn't mean to go take on 8 million things at once. It's, here's the one thing I want to do. I really like how this person does this. So practice that
Mhm.
one thing. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to,
Right.
you've got to know what you can or can't do. And if you don't have a leader who's doing that for you, then you have
Mhm.
to do it yourself if you want to get better. Otherwise, you're just going to live in frustration city all day long, and nobody likes being there.
Nobody likes that. No, no, I agree. And do it for yourself. I mean, I think that's a great
Yeah.
message too. I mean, why not? I mean, there's nothing really stopping you from
Hmm.
maybe just yourself. But yeah, it's been fascinating. I think I just want to say thank you, Stephen. I appreciate all of your wisdom. I think everything you just said, I think encompasses everything that I've always thought and believed in, especially in the lead the podcast is basically everything you just said, right? Like how do we lead ourselves and find ways, right, to
Hmm.
be in the lead in our own lives, whether it's through journaling, like you said, or some people like meditation, or,
Hmm.
there's so many, whatever works for you, like, but start developing those practices so that you can put yourself in a position where you can be in the lead and not, you know, controlled and dictated and living in this reactive world, but being more proactive and acting in ways that are in alignment to who you are and
Yeah.
what you're passionate about. And, you know, you're basically your true self. Um,
You just have to go out into the world and be you.
yeah,
And
there you go.
sometimes it might
Simple.
feel a little funny. Yeah, it might feel
Hmm.
a little funny. It might be a little weird. It might be a little, people might
Yeah.
look at you a
Hmm.
little funny when you're trying to learn how to be a leader, because you are you. trying to
Mhm.
lead your own way, which nobody
Yeah.
has ever seen before. You're a one of one.
Mhm. Yep. So
So
true.
it's going to be strange. It's going to be
Mhm.
funny, and you're always going to be miserable if you always just want to. I am exactly like this leader, or this is how it is, or the way it is. Right? You're going to be miserable if
Mhm.
you don't unlock the ability to just be you every day. That's how
Love
I look.
it.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Just so thankful and grateful that we connected, and I love your mindset and the way you think. And I know
Mhm.
that's why we have all these great chats. And I
Right.
just think appreciate you inviting me on here today. It's been
Yeah.
an absolute blast, and I learned quite a bit from you, like I always do. So
Yeah.
I
I
just
appreciate it.
appreciate you. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Likewise. I mean, definitely. I mean, we could probably record like a 4-hour podcast because I feel like I could probably talk to you forever, especially on this
That'll be
topic.
our next one.
I know, right? Yeah.
We'll do that
Yeah.
next time. We'll go long form.
Yeah. Right. Well, maybe break it up into different segments. But yeah, no, I appreciate your time today and kind of giving us your, and all the listeners your perspectives
Of
on
course.
leadership. And um, yeah, I hope that we do have another Stephen Diaz episode in the future. I would
Yeah,
love
you
that.
know where to find me. You know where to find me. I hang out on Twitter quite a bit. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me
Yeah.
on Instagram. That's where I hang out, just in a couple little social areas and stuff like
Oh,
that. I
cool.
try to have a little fun here and there.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll definitely make sure to link any links down in the show notes on how you can connect with Stephen.
Yeah.
And we're a fun little bunch, especially on Twitter. Got a fun little group of people
Yeah, and
talking about all kinds of
if the
stuff.
listeners don't know, they better join your. If they're on Twitter and they're not jumping
Uh-huh.
into the leaders chat, they've got to hop on that
Yeah.
one. I absolutely love that. So if you just want to
Yeah.
add something new to your routine
Mm-hmm.
that you haven't done before, and you're on
Yeah.
Twitter and you want to amp up your leadership skills, then
Yeah.
jumping on the leaders chat would be a great
Yeah.
place to start.
Yeah. Leaders Chat is on Twitter every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific. And thanks for plugging that. And yeah,
I
it's one of my
love it. You
favorite
know
things
that.
too. Yeah. I know. I love the community. It's always a good time. But it was such a pleasure, Stephen. I appreciate
Yes.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again for all of your wisdom. And thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. And we will chat soon. Thank you so much.